Hello and welcome back to my channel, Bookish Thoughts. And my name's Justine. Welcome to my first ever wrap-up video. Oh dear, I'm sorry about the noise. I'm filming this during the day. Again, you may have noticed this. I'm filming this right after my other video, the TBR video. But I'm just trying to get them all together because it's my birthday weekend and I don't want to be working later on. So again, cheers. I'm drinking some sparkling wine, some cheap sparkling wine. My mom did buy me some nicer sparkling wine, but I'll be saving that for my birthday itself. I also will be doing a bunch. I also plan to do a book and wine haul video for my birthday, like all the books and wines that I either bought for myself or were gifted to me for my birthday. So stay tuned for that, or let me know if that's something you want to see. But for now, what we're doing is my June wrap up. And I'm sorry to say, this is my first wrap up video, but there's basically nothing to wrap up. I joke. But I've only, oh dear, there's so many background noises. But I only read 2 books this June. I was on track to finish at least one more. I would have talked about it in my first ever video, and that was Traitor's Blade. I'm on track to finish it, but then life happened, and I just executive dysfunctioned and didn't read it. I am hoping to finish it this weekend. By the time this goes up, it probably would have been finished, but I'll reserve talking about it for my July wrap-up. So for now, we will focus on the 2 books that I did finish. So the first is Dragons of Winter Night by Marget Weis and Tracy Hickman, which is the second in the core, like, Dragonlance novels series. And the other is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Lynn, which there is a sequel, but I don't know how much it's like connected, because the book itself seemed to wrap up pretty nicely. With just a hint of like opening for a sequel. But so let's talk first about Dragons of Winter Night. So this is the second book in the Dragonlance Chronicles, and it follows again the same party or adventuring party. I use D&D terms for describing this because it is very obviously based on D&D. The first book, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, is very obviously D&D based. The only thing that I will say makes it not D&D is that I have never been part of a D&D game that went nearly as smoothly as that book's adventure did. No D&D campaign is that smooth. But obviously they ironed out the kinks. No one rolled a 1, and so it worked out. With this book, I will talk about that book some more. I have that planned for a book and wine night video. But for this book, Dragons of Winter Night, it's a continuation of their adventure. And I do have to say, I like this book a little bit more than the first one. I say that because to summarize, what it's about is that they are a group of friends who come back together, and they are searching their land, or where they are, their continent or whatever, is being attacked by dragons, and by dragon high lords, and by reptilian dragon creatures. And they're like taking over the land, burning, pillaging, enslaving people. And like the dragons are setting everything on fire. And these people are trying to find a way to restore the old gods and to bring back peace and drive the dragon high lords away from their land. So that's the basic arc of what they're doing. The book started in the first book started with that premise, and they were able to defeat one of the dragon high lords at the end of that book. But then obviously in this new book, there's a new one. They're facing a new threat, or they've discovered a new problem, and they're trying to do a new way of solving it, which is something to do with these dragon orbs, which supposedly control the dragon. So they are searching for those orbs and trying to bring them to Solamnia, which is where this. Sorry, the fizz is making me burp. Where these order of knights are gathered or were gathered back in the old days. And they're supposedly the ones who can slay the dragons, because back in their history there was this great knight who forged the dragon lance, and it was him who slew and drove away the old dragons, and he was a knight of Salamia. So that's kind of the premise of the second book. And then, so I did like this one a little bit more. I think that this second book went a lot deeper into the characters. In the first book, they were all very basic stock characters. They were, it was like the brave half-elf, the solemn knight, the silly Kender, who's like a halfling, and then this lovesick she-elf, the mysterious wizard. They were all very stock characters. There wasn't a lot of depth to them. They tried to put depth into it, but it still felt very stock charactery. I empathized with them, but at the same time, I didn't think of them as people, but more as characters. Again, this emphasized the fact that they were like playable characters in a D&D game. In the second book, there was a lot more humanization. That's wrong to say because not all of them are human. But there was a lot more humanization for them. Their problems were discussed a lot more in-depthly. Their inner thoughts and motivations were explored more deeply. And in particular, the character of Sturm, he was not a favorite of mine in the first book. I thought he was just like a boring paladin, lawful good guy. But in this second book, he was not lawful good in the second book. He was more like neutral good or even chaotic good, depending on your on how you look at things. But yeah, he became a much more sympathetic character. I empathized with his problems so much more. And it was a very good journey, and I felt like this book actually explored deeper themes about, or deeper questions about good and evil, and law versus, or law, or like the law versus what is good, things like that. Doing what's lawful versus doing what is good. And I thought that it was a lot more meaningful and a lot more enjoyable than the first one. Don't get me wrong, the first one was really good. It was really fun, but I kind of read it just as like a fun little fantasy adventure, With this book, I really engaged with it a lot more. I thought a lot more while I was reading it. I will say what I didn't like with the second book was that there were a lot of time jumps, like time skips, where it feels like important things happened. Like at one point, while they're searching for the dragon orbs, there's a time skip, and there's just like, oh, we have a dragon orb now, and I'm like, oh, I don't get to read about the adventure of how you got the dragon orb. Guess not. Although looking at some of the other books, I think it's featured in some of the old other publications. But it's just a little weird because you hear about great adventures that happen off page, but you don't get to read about them. But at the same time, like I said, I'm not upset because what you do get to read about is very interesting. So I think this got a 4.5 stars for me. At least a 4, but I think a 4.5. If I do use the CAWPILE rating system developed by G on Book Rose, so I use her CAWPILE spreadsheet, and I input like my ratings there, and I use the rating that comes out. If I were to rate this on my own without CAWPILE, I'd probably give it a 5. But using CAWPILE, which I like 'cause it's a little stricter, a little more systematic, gives it a little bit more science feeling. Using CAWPILE, I think I gave this a 4.5. I would recommend it. You do have to read the first book though before you read this one. But I do think it's worth, like, I feel like the first book gives you like a fun little taste. It lets you enjoy the characters. It gives you a feeling for the world. And then with the second book, that's where you kind of draw into the story and into the depths, which is what I really love about fantasy, which, you know, like the first book and just be fun and like power of friendship, you know, things like that. But with the second book, you start exploring deeper questions, and it's good. I like it. Do recommend. I will be proceeding to Dragons of Spring Dawn. I don't know when, but hopefully within the year. I am hoping to finish the first quartet within this year. So let's see. The other book that I finished, like I said, was Daughter of the Moon Goddess. So I finished this on audiobook. It was 15 hours long. And it took me like, I think it took me like 3 months to finish. Not because it was so long, but because I just couldn't get into this book. I just could not. I don't know if it's because it was an audiobook, but I just couldn't get into it. First of all, I will say this should have passed by really fast because it is so fast paced. Like, the first 4 chapters could have been an entire book all on its own with a different writer. So there's that. There's also huge time skips, like literal years pass within a couple of sentences. And it's fine. It works. It works for the character. This is not a criticism. It's just an observation. And actually something that I feel should have made me go through this faster. What did slow me down was the main character and narrator, Shingen, was just I don't know. It's hard to say. She felt a little Mary Sue-like, you know, from, I don't know if the fandom term is common, but she felt a little too perfect. She felt a little too successful at everything she did without hardly trying. And I know that I know she talks about doing training and working hard and all that, but they're never showing it. It's all montage. So it all feels like, ooh, I just got good and I am good now. And yeah, it just didn't make her a sympathetic character. It also made her inner angst not very sympathetic for me, because it felt like, well, you're succeeding at everything you do. What are you worried about? Plus the love interest felt very sudden. There was no, like, it just felt like the 2 love interests were not in love with her and then in love with her right away. There didn't seem to be, and the way it's displayed is not like an instant love thing where they fall in love from across the room from each other, you know? It felt like they were trying to build it as being played up as like falling deep into love, but it was written like it was instant love. And I don't know, I guess that's just not how I like my romances to be. I want my romances to be a little bit more fleshed out, especially in a book that's so epic that there's 500 pages of this, or 15 hours of audiobook. I felt like there could have been so much more fleshing out of the love story. After that, there were several plot twists or plot developments, but the major plot twist that happened towards the end, at about like 75% of the way through, it was predictable. I predicted the plot twist, and I was hoping they would take it in one direction. I can post like a spoilery version of this discussion, but I was hoping it would go in one direction that would have made it interesting and less cliche. but it didn't. It went the more cliche route, and I was just disappointed, and I didn't care after that point. I was like, "Eh." And there were also, um, and at the end, there was a lot of Deus Ex Machina. There was a lot of plot. There were a lot of plot developments that were waved away with a few sentences that these were major plot developments and were a source of major conflict throughout the book. And then because it's the ending, they don't matter anymore, and now we live happily ever after. It's look, I don't want to say this wasn't beautifully written. It was. The language was really beautiful. And the narrator of the audiobook was good. She really gave it a lot of expression, a lot of depth. But the book just was not for me. It wasn't bad by any means, but I just found it hard to suspend disbelief and enjoy it as much as other people seem to. Um, yeah, it just wasn't my thing. I will not be reading the sequel probably, especially if it's going to be nearly as long. It's not worth it for me for that long. And yeah, I don't regret having read it, don't get me wrong, but I will not be pursuing this series, and I probably will not be pursuing this author. So yeah, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars on Storygraph, 3 on Goodreads. I realize that's not a low rating, but that's pretty. But yeah, I'm a generous rater. I'm a generous rater, especially if I don't find anything outright problematic about the book. And I just find it like kind of mediocre. I will give it a generous rating. But yeah, not continuing. So those are my 2 books for the month of June. Thank you for joining me for my boozy bookish thoughts. I hope you leave a like and a comment. For a comment, leave the champagne glass emoji in case you don't have anything, or share your thoughts with me about these 2 books, or share your thoughts with me about Trader's Blade, but no spoilers, because I do want to read it and have fun with it. But yeah, leave the champagne glass emoji. Please subscribe if you want to hear more like these videos. I don't know what I have. I think my next video will be the booktube newbie tag, so please stay tuned for that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you, my boozy bookish friends, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.